Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Front and Center, a program that focuses on developments in the Philippines, legislations that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concerns the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of this and more will be Front and Center. Join me in this half-hour program here on Radio Pilipinas World Service. You can watch this program over Radio Pilipinas World Service via Facebook page live broadcast. Just access our Facebook page, Radio Pilipinas World Service. You can also catch every Front and Center programs over our YouTube channel. Just type in your YouTube browser, Radio Pilipinas World Service. The program, Front and Center, and the programs of Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be listened to the following shortwave frequencies: 12.10 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.820 MHz. So come and join us for another edition of Front and Center. I'm your host, Rey Sampang. Recently, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. signed the 2024 national budget for the Philippines, amounting to more than 5.700 trillion pesos. We will discuss this in detail with one of our distinguished guests here on Radio Pilipinas. He is the Chief Economist of the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation. He is Mr. Michael Recafort. Good day, Sir Mike, and welcome to the program Front and Center.
Good day, Mr. Ray, and to all your viewers.
All right. It is indeed a pleasure to have you, Sir Mike, in our program Front and Center, and I believe this is the first time that we'll be having you as our resource person in this program. So, like I said, the President this week just signed the 2024 national budget amounting to more than 5.700 trillion pesos. And that is around more than 9% higher compared to the 2023 national budget. Can we get your take on this? Will this be enough to address the fiscal and financial measures or needs of the country to meet its economic target, Sir Mike?
It's relatively large, and considering that the growth of the national budget is at 9.5%, that's usually higher than the economy's growth. Typically, it's around 6% in recent years, even prior to the pandemic. Meaning to say that it's equivalent to more than 21% of the country's economy. So given that, if it's very important to utilize fully the national budget to really maximize the benefits to the country, especially to the poorest of the poor, meaning if that is maximized, the use of which, learning from the lessons earlier this year when there was some form of underspending or underutilization, that would contribute to approximately more than 200 basis points or more than 2 percentage points to the country's growth. If the country's growth was still expected to be at least 6% for the coming years, so more than one-third of that growth would be coming from the national budget, from government spending per se. That goes to show how important government spending is in contributing to the country's economic growth. We have seen that when earlier this year, when there was some form of underspending, and of course, not to mention also the adverse impact of higher prices or inflation earlier this year, in terms of reduced spending by consumers, by businesses, industries, and the government. We have seen the growth slowing down to 4.3% in the second quarter. But when government spending was accelerated, acknowledging the underutilization earlier this year, suddenly the GDP growth accelerated to 5.9% in the third quarter. And that is still expected to grow further in the fourth quarter due to the seasonal increase in
Mhm.
demand. Especially, well, that could be the biggest uh, for many businesses and industries in terms of sales and spending by consumers and businesses and other institutions. So, yeah, there's a good chance to see economic growth of at least 6% for the fourth quarter, and that would be a full year growth of close
Mhm.
to 6%, which is the lower end of the government target. So it's still within striking distance. It's still
Okay.
possible to achieve the lower end of the government's target. So therefore, uh, it's again important to emphasize the need to ramp up government spending also
Mhm.
through the
Mhm.
use of that national budget. It's very potent.
Mhm.
Well, for many years, we've seen the biggest budget allocation going to education and then followed by infrastructure spending and other social services. So
Yes.
why is this very important? Well, education is the biggest equalizer.
Mhm.
That helps bring more people out of poverty,
Mhm.
especially in the countryside. Actually, even in the urban area. So that's why it's an investment approach, so to speak,
All
for
right.
education.
Sir,
That provides a big. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
yes. Mike, the national budget also allocated, just like what you mentioned, the national budget allocated a large sum of portion of funding for social services, including financial support for the less privileged. Will this help in uplifting the economy, or will this only burden the national corpus in providing another batch of quote unquote ayudas to our less fortunate, or to our marginalized sector of society?
It's always very important to make sure that the poorest of the poor gets the most help. And especially now, we came from relatively higher prices or inflation. So at least providing a relief to them, to the poorest of the poor, that
Mm-hmm.
would indeed help because the funds would be used for spending also for on
Mm-hmm.
basic necessities. So that
Mm-hmm.
would help them. It would prevent people, or at least help shore up more people from poverty,
Mm-hmm.
although this is a relief measure, but definitely it would be a boost. The greatest benefit would normally be felt by those in need the most
Mm-hmm.
in our society. So therefore, the biggest economic benefit and growth would be felt also by the whole economy if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
definitely, of course, that complements also the general strategy, of course,
Mm-hmm.
to prioritizing education, making sure that many of our poor kababayans would have access to quality education, given the fact that uh, education has been free up to the even up to the tertiary level. In
Mm-hmm.
the recent years, tuition at state colleges and universities has been free, shouldered by the government. So uh, yeah, and that would definitely help them. And of course, that's together with other than this ayuda,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's also consistent for the need to provide greater nutrition to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important to prevent dropouts, especially from the poor.
Yes.
Their nutrition, the food, and also the healthcare services and other social services will
Yes.
definitely help. That's gonna be that will be consistent and would work hand in hand
Mm-hmm.
in making sure that the country achieves uh, faster, also more inclusive economic growth and development.
Mm-hmm.
Especially that it's something that's holistic.
Yes.
That's something foundational because the country's demographics uh, already very much favorable in recent years. Meaning our population is more than 110 million. That's 12th largest in the world. Majority already part of the working age, or more than 50 million Filipinos. We're the last country to do so
Mm-hmm.
in the region. Other ASEAN countries were this was achieved. The demographic sweet spot or demographic dividend, or majority of the population working age. This has been achieved since 2015. How
Mm-hmm.
does that compare to the other countries in the region? Japan was earlier by 50 years in 1965. Hong Kong and Singapore was more than 40 years earlier in 1980. South Korea 1985, China 1990, or 30 years. Other ASEAN countries, our neighboring countries, were ahead 10 to 20 years. So now is the moment of the Philippines, meaning you have more, well, majority of population working. We have a relatively young age of below 25 years old, among the youngest in the region, meaning to say that there would be more people working.
Mm-hmm.
They More people would have incomes,
Mm-hmm.
livelihood, and well, employment, jobs, and whatever capacity, small businesses, locally or abroad. So there's increased spending power due to higher incomes, and the young population, they would start families.
Mm-hmm.
They would send their children to school, and they would buy houses, buy vehicles. They would spend. They would shop. They would travel, and they would invest. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why our economic growth has been relatively higher, because that's very typical of countries reaching demographic sweet spot.
Yeah.
At least economic growth of 6% in for the next 5, 10 or so years in the foreseeable future, building. And the fact that we're coming from a low base, meaning our per capita income is more than $3,000. So we have yet to reach the middle income country status.
All right.
Unlike our neighboring countries, some of them are already coming from a high base,
Mm-hmm.
much higher per capita income. That's why their growth rates are not as much. That explains well why the Philippine economic growth has been one of the fastest in the region, in among Asian and ASEAN countries, and also among relatively larger countries around the world. That has been the track record from 2012 to 2019. Our economic growth has always been at least 6%, and that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be we have to expect a similar. It would go revert that trend average at least 6% in the foreseeable future. So that's why education is very important.
All right.
If we invest in that,
Mm-hmm.
there would be, well, especially the youth, the next generation.
All right.
They would have more. They become more productive in terms of they have earning, they have more jobs, more livelihood, either here and abroad, and that's gonna really solidify the foundation of our economy, because some global banks, they're of the view that the Philippines would increase its rankings in the coming years and decades. For instance, there's this view that the Philippines by 2050 to 2075, so that's at least 26 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
could the ranking could increase to within the top 15 to top 20 in the world. Currently, we're number 37. So that's 20 notches higher for our rankings because of this demographic sweet spot that's providing the foundation for that. Because, these are global banks, the likes of Goldman Sachs, seeing this view for the Philippines. They saw this great potential for the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Even prior to the pandemic, we're talking about the past 10 years or so. That has been their view for the country, because the larger economies in the world, then the fast emerging ones, they coined the term BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China. They are the, well, large economies with large populations. So there's great promise. So it's very important, since our population is the 12th largest in the world, more than 110 million. It's very important to make our population very productive.
Okay. But Mike,
And it all, yeah, go
yeah.
ahead,
But
Mr. Ray.
what, Mike? What sector or area of the 2024 national budget do you see will have an enormous impact in terms of economic growth?
So it's still, well, of course, education, it's really an investment approach. Equally important also is the spending. The next in line after education is infrastructure. Government spending goes there. It's very important because the various infrastructure projects that aims to also attract more foreign investments into the country, meaning that infrastructure projects like mass transport systems, like the subway, that's the biggest right now for the infrastructure projects. It's going to take some time, but that's very important eventually. The train systems, the MRTs, the LRTs, the PNRs, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
airports,
Mm-hmm.
seaports, roads, uh, and other infrastructure like bridges, with the objective of which is to further boost the productivity of the economy. Because right now the challenge has been congestion, like the traffic jam. So
Yes.
we need more of these, because we know if people get stuck in in congestion, in traffic jams, there's lost productivity. And of course, it's very important to attract more tourists into the country, both foreign and local tourists. The movement of their movement across the country, making it more convenient for them. So since the subway project would connect to the airport, that's a big plus.
Mm-hmm.
That's similar to what other neighboring countries have done to boost their tourism, to make
Mm-hmm.
it easier for people, for tourists, both local and foreign, to move around, and also for the movement of exports and imports through, of course, through more roads, skyways, more toll roads, more bypass roads, enable to lessen the congestion and
Mm-hmm.
uh, improve the movement of goods, both
Mm-hmm.
distinct locally and for the international markets, and as well as the movement of our workers.
All right.
So it's very important. It's an investment approach also. Decisions are made based on what would be the eventual return, both tangible and intangible, to the
Mm-hmm.
economy, to the
Mm-hmm.
people, to the
Mm-hmm.
well-being of people, and also what would help attract more investments. And it's also very important to invest in energy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
electricity, especially
Yes.
that
Mm-hmm.
although this is largely now all with the private sector, it's very important also to promote more renewable power, because
All right.
that's a consideration for foreign investors. Like it's very important for to attract more foreign investments.
All right. But
It must be easier to do business here in the country and more profitable to do so. And
yes.
one way to do it is to reduce electricity costs, especially if there would be heavy industries like
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing, and able
Mm-hmm.
to lower
Mm-hmm.
their production
Mm-hmm.
costs and make it more profitable for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that would help attract more investments, considering the fact that we have seen reforms in recent years, like the Create Law that reduced the corporate income tax to 25%. And of course, there are the rationalization of investment incentives with the sunset provisions under the Create Law, meaning greater certainty. There are already tax breaks and other investment perks for foreign investors, especially locating in the various economic zones,
Mm-hmm.
especially those oriented for export. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's really it's really emphasizing those,
Yes.
and that's part of what the resources of the national government.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the tangible intervention measures. If not, that's the best form of intervention measures to really make sure to ensure that we have faster economic growth,
Mm-hmm.
economic development that's also faster and more inclusive, to include especially the poorest regions, especially outside Metro Manila, and of course, lifting more people out of poverty. So
Yes.
that's very important, and also the social services, like even the ayudas. Well, that's objective is to make sure everything is sustainable. Like
Yes.
sometimes education is not enough.
Yeah.
Well, we need to prevent dropout rates,
Okay.
especially from the poorest students. Make
All
sure
right.
that their learning is sustained through the
Okay.
proper nutrition and health care. And yeah, that's one way to sustain the learning process of the students, and also to ensure the well-being of our citizens, especially the
All
poorest of
right.
the poor, through
Okay, Mike.
proper
All right.
health care.
All right. Mike, you said investments, foreign investors, how to attract them. But my question is, do we have enough foreign investors that have directly invested in the Philippines? Especially the president this year alone has traveled more than, I think, more than 14 times or more than 10 times, uh, doing his foreign trips, his state visits, trying to woo foreign investors to invest in the Philippines. Did you see any positive sign? Did you see any positive achievements in the president's foreign trips that will say that we are now in the right track, especially when it comes to foreign investments in the Philippines?
Yeah, in recent months, maybe earlier this year and even last year, we have seen the foreign direct investments data hovered among the highest levels since the pandemic started. So, well, that could be some sign. But so far, we have seen also some softness in recent months because of the impact of, well, it's a worldwide thing, higher prices, higher inflation that led to higher interest rates, U.S. Central Bank raising rates, as well as our local central bank to contain inflation, to achieve the price stability mandate, especially, of course, why is price stability very, very important? Because it's for the best interest of the poorest of the poor also. Because if inflation is not controlled, it's going to spiral higher. That's why global central banks took that proactive measures to raise rates, to slow things down. Even we've been hearing risk of recession. So that has somewhat softened also foreign investments worldwide, including here locally, foreign direct investments to slow
Mm.
down a bit because funding costs, interest rates went up from zero, practically zero in the United States up to March of last year,
Mm. Mm.
since the time of the pandemic. It's now raised to the highest in 22 years or since
Mm.
2001 at
Mm.
range of 5.25 to 5.5. Practically imagine it was just zero March of last year.
Mm.
So because the main objective is to control inflation, to
Okay.
slow things down, to slow demand. And I think that they have been fairly successful in doing so because oil prices already started to go down,
Mm. Mm.
despite the challenges brought about by the two wars, the Russia-Ukraine war since February of last year, as well as the Israel-Hamas war since October 7. And of
Mm.
course, we have really
Okay. Well, I think we lost no, we lost the connection with Sir Mike, but we will be trying to reconnect.
and
Yan. Yan, go ahead. Go ahead,
yeah,
Mike.
and that helped with oil prices going down. Now it's among the lowest in 2 years.
Mm.
So at $74. But when the Israel Hamas war started last October 7th, it was like 82 to $83. So it's much lower now by almost $10. And
Yeah.
since the Russia Ukraine war last year, it started at $92. It's way lower now by $20. It came from a peak during March of last year, 2 weeks into the Russia Ukraine war. It reached a high of $130. That's why we've seen problems on
Yeah.
inflation because of that, triggered by that Russia-Ukraine war since last year. But now, since the central banks have raised rates, even our own central bank, they have raised rates alongside with the Fed from a record low of 2% of our policy rate. We last saw that May of last year. Now it's at 6.5%. That's the highest in 16 years.
All right. Mike,
So
now that we're talking about this, uh, may I ask this question? Will the banking sector have an important role in 2024 in terms of economic growth? I know you're the chief economist of the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation. That's why I'm asking this question because the financial and banking sector plays an important role in the projection of the economic growth of the Philippines. What is the role of the banking sector in 2024?
yeah, true, Mr. Ray. Well, maybe the biggest highlight would be there are at least two major themes for the economy, particularly for the banking industry. First is the further reopening of the economy. So far, we haven't had any large lockdowns since 2022, and officially since July 22, the COVID state of public health emergency has been lifted finally. So no more restrictions going forward. And we've seen continued recovery for the hardest hit industries by the pandemic, like tourism. Continues to grow, both local and foreign tourism, and as well as MSMEs, because at least after almost 2.5 years of lockdowns, finally the school children are back to school since August of last year. So it's already the second straight year, and that really means a lot for small businesses, the MSMEs. So we still see continued recovery as well as many services industries,
Mm-hmm.
especially those also hit by the pandemic. So
Mm.
we still see continued recovery. So that would really mean well.
All right.
Many businesses they have their sales are increasing, their earnings also, and even their investments, their
All right.
capital expenditures, their expansion plans are clearer now. So
Mm.
that would increase the demand for loans
All right.
eventually. So
My
that's the first part. Yeah,
okay.
Mr. Ray.
My last question for our interview today is, what is your assessment for next year? Can the Filipino people expect a better financial situation, a better economic situation compared to this year, 2023? Because 2023 we faced a lot of headwinds, there were a lot of challenges. Now people are expecting or anticipating a better year come 2024. Is there anything that we can say look forward to in 2024, Mike?
Yeah, Mr. Ray, that's right. Economic growth is expected to by around us at least 6 to 6.5%. So that's better. Well, the target this year, at least near the lower end of the target, which is 6%, which is still achievable. So it will be much higher. And inflation, it's gonna slow down already, the increase in the prices. It's already at 4.1% last November. That's the slowest in 1.5 years. And because of the base effects, and lower world oil prices. So there's a chance for inflation to be as low as 3.6 to 3.7% for next year. And that's already below the inflation target of the BSP at 4%. So meaning the growth in the economy and in incomes and in earnings would be much faster compared to the growth in prices. So definitely there would be more people, more consumers, households, businesses, industries, and other institutions to be better off because the growth in livelihood, in earnings, in jobs, in incomes would be much faster than the growth in prices and eventually. So that's why it's very important for inflation to be better controlled, especially now, largely due to the lower global oil prices. And we need to manage also the effects of El Nino this year, the
All right.
drought, the reduced rainfall, better managing rising inflation, because rising inflation accounts for nearly 9% of the inflation basket, meaning to say that for every, say, 10% as a sensitivity analysis, just to simulate, every 10% increase in local rice prices would contribute around around zero point 0.9 percentage point to the
Mm-hmm.
headline
Mm-hmm.
inflation. So that's why it's very important to, but nonetheless, with the further reopening of the economy, that's also the policy priority. No more restrictions whatsoever related to COVID. And and more importantly, since inflation is moving towards to the central bank targets for both in the US and locally, so there's already a good chance that the US central bank, the Federal Reserve, would cut interest rates. The markets are expecting somewhere between a cut of 100 to 150 basis points, or 1 to 1.5 percentage points. So that's definitely going to help. Even our local central bank is expected to match any cut by the central banks in policy rates. It would lower interest rates, the policy rates. It would lower also the borrowing costs, the loan rate. So it's good business for loans. It's going to encourage more investments.
All right, Sir Mike, I would like to extend this interview, but just the same, we're running out of material time, and we appreciate it very much. Every time we call you up, every time we ask for this interview, you don't, you always give us the time and opportunity to share with us your knowledge, your expertise, and insights on this matter. That's why we appreciate it very much. Thank you very much, Sir Mike. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're most welcome, Mr. Ray and team. And also, thank you so much for having me at the show, and happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays, and that is our Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation Chief Economist, Mr. Michael Ricafort. I hope you enjoyed today's edition of Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. You can watch this program over Radyo Pilipinas World Service via Facebook page live broadcast. Just access our Facebook page, Radyo Pilipinas World Service. You can also catch every Front and Center programs over our YouTube channel. Just type in your YouTube browser, Radyo Pilipinas World Service. The program Front and Center and the programs of Radyo Pilipinas World Service can also be listened to the following shortwave frequencies: 12.010 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.820 MHz. Together with our producer, Erwin Peñano, and our technical personnel, of course, Mr. Milo Janela, together with Mr. Jerome Toledo, I am your host, Rey Sampang. Thank you for listening, and join us again for another episode of Front and Center. Mabuhay and love the Philippines.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.